Hey, welcome to AI Splainer. Today we're diving into a really big political story unfolding in the Philippines. It all boils down to a massive 100 billion peso question. Why on earth would a president say no to that much cash?
I mean, picture this. Your boss comes to you and offers this huge potential bonus for all these projects you're passionate about, but you just turn it down. Cold. Sounds kind of weird, right? Well, that's pretty much the mystery we're looking at here.
And just to be clear, we are not talking about chump change here. This is a presidential veto on nearly 100 billion pesos. So the big question we're going to tackle in this explainer is why? Why would you reject that kind of money?
All right, so to really get why this veto happened, we first have to wrap our heads around what this money is. And honestly, this is where it gets a little tricky for a lot of people, because it's not regular budget money. It's something called unprogrammed funds.
Okay, let's break this down with this super simple analogy. Just think about the country's budget like your own personal budget, right? The program funds, that's like your regular, fixed monthly salary. You know it's coming, you rely on it for rent, groceries, all the essentials. Now, the unprogrammed funds, those are like a potential year-end bonus. It sounds amazing, but you can't go out and spend it until your boss actually confirms it's happening and the money hits your bank account.
So that's the absolute key takeaway here. This isn't cash that's just sitting around waiting to be spent. It's a maybe fund. It's basically a list of projects on standby that can only get the green light if, and this is a big if, the government manages to collect way more revenue than it planned for.
Okay, so you might be thinking, if it's just a maybe fund, what's the big deal? Why reject it? I mean, having a backup plan sounds like a good idea, right? Well, this is where the plot really starts to thicken, because when you dig into the backstory, you find some pretty serious red flags being raised about these funds in particular.
And a huge part of the problem comes from official reports. We're talking about the government's own watchdog, the Commission on Audit, or COA. They'd already flagged massive problems with similar funds in the past, including, and get this, a pretty shocking discovery of ghost students. That's right, money was being set aside for students who didn't even exist. You know, a history like that is going to make anyone really nervous.
And that really gets us to the heart of the issues behind this veto. You've got three big things. First, major concerns about transparency. Nobody was really sure where all this money was supposed to end up. Second, you have huge questions about accountability, especially with that ghost student stuff in the background. And third, it's about a fundamental fight for control. Who actually gets the final say on spending this bonus money?
So this whole fight over control, it really blows up into a classic political tug-of-war. And believe me, this isn't just about spreadsheets and accounting. This is about something much bigger, the separation of powers and the ultimate question of who holds the nation's purse strings.
So, on one side of the rope, you've got the executive branch headed by the president. They're the ones who actually have to spend the money and are held responsible for making sure it's done right. So, naturally, they want tight oversight and control. But on the other side, you have the legislative branch. That's the lawmakers in Congress and the Senate. Their job, their power, is to propose the budget and decide where the money gets allocated in the first place.
So who really controls the nation's purse strings? That's the question this whole thing boils down to. At the end of the day, this veto is a powerful statement. It's the president asserting executive power, basically saying, hey, lawmakers, you can propose whatever you want, but my administration will not spend money that we think is questionable or doesn't have a rock-solid justification. It's a real battle for that final say.
Okay, so what happens now? The president used a tool called a line item veto. Think of it like a surgical strike with a red pen. He didn't throw out the entire budget, no way. He just crossed out these specific line items. But what does that really mean for that 100 billion pesos and all the projects that were depending on it?
Well, the fallout is pretty direct. First off, that nearly 100 billion pesos in unprogrammed funds, it's blocked, frozen, can't be touched. Second, all the programs and projects that were supposed to be funded by that money are now just stuck, with no funding. And third, and this part is super important, lawmakers can't just take that vetoed money and shuffle it over to something else. The veto erases it from the budget completely.
Which leaves us with the big, lingering question, doesn't it? Was this whole thing a necessary move to protect taxpayer money and demand more transparency, a stand for fiscal responsibility? Or was it a calculated political power play and that constant tug of war for control? The truth is, it's probably a bit of both. But one thing's for sure, it sets a huge precedent for how these budget battles are going to be fought in the future.
So if this explainer helped you make sense of this whole budget drama and you learned something new, do us a huge favor and smash that like button. It really helps us out. And of course, subscribe to AI Splainer so you don't miss our next breakdown of the complex stories that actually matter. Thanks for hanging out with us.